Hello, everyone. I am the icon, Sean Jazz Stevens. We're here. Actually, I'm out and about today, and this is like the second time or third time I've tried to record this. So now I'm going to try to keep things concise and, a little shorter so it makes a little bit more sense. I've been asked to talk about mental health and talk about what it's like to grow up with mental illness and what it's like to be treated um, within um, for someone with mental illness and how they're treated every day and whatever, and also how stigma comes into effect. Um, Before, when I tried this before, it was just way too long. So I'm going to try to keep things precise, like I said. So just bear with me. So first, I'm going to shorten up the beginning part of it. So people know. I have been seeing I was seeing a doctor and a psychiatrist and a psychologist and all these things from the age of 3. At 3 years old, my mother married my stepfather. Actually, technically, she was married in 1981, I think. Yeah, I think she was born in 81, which my brother Edward would come into the picture. And then by 1983, I had 2 other siblings. So everyone was born by 1983, all 4 of us kids. Now, I have, admittedly, first of all, I grew up with no father. My mother, had me out of wedlock, whatever. I don't care about that stuff, and I'm okay with that. It didn't. I don't let that define who I am. And all honestly, my mother did the best she could do. What she had. In all honesty, she was tougher than most guys I know. Anyway, she had a horrible taste in men. I got to say that. But anyway, she met my stepfather, who was an oil guy, who his mother and father coddled him everywhere. His mother coddled him all the way up until she died, and a week later he died. So there you go. That goes to show you he can't live without a mom. I always grew up being able to rely on myself because I had to. Now, when I was seeing a doctor at 3 years old, I didn't know. I mean, 3 years old. I mean, how many people do anything at 3 years old? How do you define someone at 3 years old? Exactly do you explain to a doctor why you think your 3-year-old needs to see a psychologist or whatever? Well, here's how it works. So my step aunt, who was going to school at Suffolk University, which is a very pristine, college for people who are studying human services. I myself have a degree in human services from Suffolk, but I do have a human services degree. I also have a degree in film, but that's okay. That's two degrees, but that's beside the point. Now, my aunt, they listened to her a lot, my step aunt, and being that my brothers and my sister all shared the same father, I was always kind of seen as like the black sheep, so to speak. My mother, in retrospect, was also not very popular with her own siblings because my mother was loud, outspoken. My mother was basically someone who beat into her own drum. No one's going to tell her what to do, how she's going to do things. She's going to do what she wants to do, how she wants to do it. She's going to party it up. She's going to live the life that she wants to lead. And as she used to say, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die happy. That's how she looked at things. Despite how many times I tried to convince her not to smoke or anything, that didn't stop her from doing so all the way up to the end. But again, I'm from my mother's perspective, and I'm someone who I grew up, not without a father and having that in that system, in that life, and in that family. I was always not treated like everyone else anyway, because number one, I'm not their own. So I was seeing a doctor, psychiatrist, whatever else. And anything I would do was magnified to, something else. Now, in the other videos, I had showed pictures of me as a kid. And, to be honest, there's not a lot of pictures left of me as a child, which is why I can't show more. Um, but, the pictures I did show, I seen one picture I was playing with what my grandmother had was a recorder, which kind of looks like a flute or a clarinet. That's in English, Irish, or United Kingdom. It's very popular in the United Kingdom. My family originally from Ireland, so the recorder is very popular there. So I seen a picture of me at like 1 trying to play that. But also, I remember back then. Now the other thing you got to know about me is My memory has been tested numerous times over the years, and my memory is exceptional. My long-term memory. I remember all the way back to being next to my mother's bed in the crib, and then somersaulting out of the crib to be on the bed. Now, granted, I didn't go anywhere after the somersaulting. It was just the art of I enjoyed flipping onto the bed. I thought it was a blast, and I would often laugh when I would land on the bed. There was only one time I missed the bed, by the way, and when I asked people about that, how old I was told I couldn't possibly remember that. I'm too young to remember that. But in fact, I did. I very much remembered that. And so that's kind of how my memory goes. I have a very extensive memory. Um, so at 3 years old, I guess they decided that I had too much energy because I was constantly trying to do something. I was ambitious for one. First of all, I like to do things. I like to be active at that point. I was also very creative, even back then. Today, we know I'm a big writer and I've been a filmmaker and I've been in the wrestling world for a long time. And creating stuff and being kind of imaginary, using the imagination to make worlds or whatever for either film or whatever else that I've adapted to. Being a writer, I was really good at that. Even way back at that age, I was already come up with bedtime stories at 3. I didn't know how to write or read, but I knew, how the story wanted to go. Now, the family didn't like that, I guess. I guess that they saw that as, I don't know, I guess they didn't understand that. How can a kid have an imagination this young? He can't have an imagination, I guess. I guess that was not seen as a good thing. So they brought me to a doctor and a psychiatrist, and they said that I had too much energy. At that point, they labeled me ADD. And then it was ADHD, attention hyperactivity affectionity disorder, ADHD. Yeah, I probably put that in different ways there, but as it turns out, I didn't have that either. But at that time, they gave me medication for that. They treated me for ADHD rather, at 4. So at 4, I was taking hardcore psychiatric medication at 4. At that time, it was medical medication called Ritalin. And when I pulled up the facts on all these medications I've taken over the years, some of the medications I pulled up, the medications that I took for a long period of time, some of them are 50, 45 pages long of various side effects and studies that have been shown of why these are dangerous things. But I guess back in the 80s, no one thought of looking at that or anything like that. But I guess they felt that, at 4, I had too much energy and I was creative and I wanted to do stuff. At 4, I remember also if I was around any kind of instruments, I automatically wanted to play with it. I got a hold of a drum set. I remember listening, and I was able to play by sight, by hearing. And I had an aunt who was alive back then who would tell me how, at that young age, I was playing the drums like at a young age. And you're like, how do you know that? And I said, I just heard it on the radio, and I was learning how to play things by hearing, not by reading anything, because again, I was 4. The same thing would come into playing the piano, the organ, the keyboard. That was all by memory and by listening, and that's how I learned how to play those. I did take piano lessons years later, but by that point, I already knew how to play everything. I was already playing everything. So, that's how that worked. But again, the family didn't understand this, so they brought me to a psychiatrist and a doctor. And first of all, I want people to understand, I'm not going to tell you how to raise your own kids or what to do in this situation, but here's what I can tell you. I'm going to tell you from my perspective and what I've come to look back up on it, reflecting back at that. And as a young person, and also remember, I have 2 degrees, one in human services, so I do have a degree to be a psychiatrist, not a psychiatrist, a psychologist. I could be a therapist is what I can be. Or I can, that's what my degrees allow me to do. I can be a therapist, a social worker, or I can be, a filmmaker, which I can do that too, which I've done all of those. But, back then, that was, of course, I wouldn't have any of those back then. But when I was going at 3, 4, 5 years old, I'm going to see a doctor, a therapist every single week. You would see the therapist every week, and then you see the psychiatrist once a month. The psychiatrist would take care of the medication part of things. That's why they saw you once a month. And then your therapist would see you every week. The psychiatrist took whatever your therapist said, and that's kind of how they figured out if you were healing or if you were being treated right or whatever. But here's the thing, the therapy and the psychiatry and all that stuff, they go by whatever your family tells them ahead of time. Because always they talk to your parents alone for a little while, or whoever your guardians are at the time. For me, it was always my step grandmother and my mother, or my step aunt, my step grandmother, and and that was it. My mother would never go alone. It was always my step grandmother going with her because they had to put this image in the doctor's therapist's head that there was something wrong with me. And for a long time, I allowed people to think that there was something, or I believed for a long period of time there was something seriously wrong with me back then. But back in the 80s, mental health and mental illness was not something you bragged about. You definitely didn't have to talk about it because you would look down upon. Even today, you look down upon it. Back in the 80s, it was even worse. Like today, at least there's people talking about it more. But back then, you didn't talk about that stuff because, the kids at school would make fun of you and all these other things. But here's the way I looked at it. I was already being bullied and being, judged by the people in my own house. Because here's the thing. We all come from the same family. My mother had, I had 3 other siblings who grew up in the same house as me. If I had to see a therapist because, whatever was going in the house, then by right, everyone else should have too, because we all had the same family. We all had the same household. We had the same upbringing. But the difference is I didn't have their last name. So it's easier to point that on me, to treat me as if I'm the outcast because, I'm not with their last name. I'm proud I don't have their last name. I'm my own person. So there you go. Now, yeah, so I remember being 6 years old and I was told I had an ear infection, which I didn't know I had. And I remember going to a medical hospital for about a week maybe. And apparently, even though I was told it was an ear infection I had, it was apparently a mental evaluation. Imagine that, going to a 6-year-old, a mental evaluation, because I needed to go overnight so people could observe me to see what's wrong with me. So I don't know what my stepfamily and my mother were saying to these doctors, but here's what I can tell you. 6 years old, 5 years old, all that era, all those things, the places you'd find me is usually in front of the television, watching television, or, okay, let's be honest, that's pretty much where I was watching television. And then at night, I'd hear my stepfather and my mother arguing about having sex every night. And then I'd also have everyone in the family treating me poorly, calling me names, either to my face or behind my back. And that was reality. Having my stepfamily call me names and treat me poorly and all these other things, that's something we knew. Seeing my brothers and my sisters have meltdowns or whatever. Again, this is something that was common for us. And then, it's 6. And then, 7 came along. I watched my uncle, who I spent a lot of time with my aunt and uncle over their house on weekends and holidays and vacations and stuff. And I was exposed to alcoholism at a young age where my uncle, I have 2 uncles at that point who are, considered alcoholics. One, at 4, 5, 6 years old, I didn't know there was a difference. I figured, if he's an alcoholic, then he's a jolly, guy like my other uncle. One uncle was a very funny guy. I loved that guy. He was great. He was funny. He was joyful. Didn't hurt anyone. He was kind of the hippie that never grew up, loved music, Then I had this other uncle who in front of me, who I used to have a lot of respect for, he tried killing my aunt in front of me because he had a alcohol problem, and he came home and came back to the trailer. Actually, we weren't even home. Went to a fair, and I was 6 or 7 rather, and I watched him almost kill my aunt and almost rip her eye out. And I can still see that in my head to this day. And then, 1987, also we had the house fire. We had our first house. Up to that point, we lived with my step grandmother and my step family. But then we lived in our own house for a little while. The house burned down when I wasn't there. Apparently, it was an electrical fire, they said. It was right after Christmas. And my mother and my family thought it was a good idea for me to see the house. And I remember, the horrific things I saw, like everything we lost. We lost everything. It was right after Christmas. We lost all of our toys, our clothes, or whatever else, and we were forced to live with my stepfamily again. I was sleeping on a cot, and then the town that we lived in felt bad for us, I guess. So every day in school, the kids would bring me bags and boxes and barrels full of toys and clothes. And as a kid growing up, I didn't understand what that was all about. I was actually embarrassed by taking the charity. I was embarrassed that this was going on. But looking back, I'm actually very thankful that people stepped up and had hearts. 'Cause that's what that was people feeling some type of compassion for my family, which is nice. Um, Unfortunately, 1987 also would see me, um, you know, after the house fire and all that stuff, and things were turbulent at the house anyway. Um, we were taken away by DSS in 1986 on Halloween, actually, 1986, and because when I was in first grade, they came to the school and they asked me what was different things at school. They were kind of talking to me about things at home or whatever, and because I didn't talk to anybody, I didn't have any friends in school back in 1986 or 85 or 84 and all the way up till 1993. Because here's the thing: at this point, I'm already seeing a therapist every single week and a psychiatrist once a month. So these are the people I see on a regular basis. Because of this, and I'm also taking medication. But when you're in that kind of a lifestyle and you're in that kind of a mindset, you have um, what they call programized, right? So you always have to take your medication. So I couldn't just stay over, someone's house because I have to have my medication. And already back then, it was a touchy subject anyway for everybody. So stigma's there. Parents didn't want their kids hanging out with me. I was taking medication. Who knows how crazy I am? But all honesty, I wasn't. I was sitting in front of the television at the most. If I went outside, I was like, I'd look into the nature. I loved nature back then. I loved learning about insects and animals. I've always loved animals and insects back then. And also, the thing about animals and insects even is that they generally know good from bad. That's just something instinctively they know. They know who are mean, who are ill-tempted. And all animals I get along with. I mean, I'm not overly fond of cats, admittedly, because I've had cats that acted obscure for me. They've done things that I don't understand because I've never been attacked by anything but a cat out of nowhere. But I understand looking back. I mean, the cat was locked in a bathroom all the time, and I just happened to go into that bathroom. The cat is territorial because that now became their place because my friend always locked them up in the bathroom. I get it. Doesn't mean I like it, but I understand it. But I loved animals. Animals usually love me. I've gone shark diving in my time. I've always been, in touch with nature and animals in general. I'm actually at a beach right now. I'm recording this right now. I'm in one of my happy places. This is a place where I decided this is where I'm going to try to do this again, and uninterrupted and out and about. It's a gloomy day. It's raining and miserable, but it's life, right? Who cares? It's going to dry up. The sun will be out tomorrow. We're going to live to another day. It's not going to rain forever. Life. Anyway, so, it's 7, 8, 7, I've seen all that already. I've already seen, my uncle almost kill my aunt, and all these other things were taken away from my mother and all that. Because when people came to me at school, I told them little things that were going on at home, and then they mixed them with other things. And then they came and took us away on Halloween, um, you know, from my mother and my stepfather. And the family labeled me being a liar because whatever I told them, they kind of used those words and twisted them around to sounding how they wanted to. I wasn't lying about anything. It's just how they perceived and how they twisted certain things around to make it sound that way. And in fact, I've never lied. And the problem a lot of people have with me is because I'm brutally honest, and people don't like honesty as much as they say they do. That's kind of how it goes. So, anywho, so I didn't do that. And then I continue and I move on. Right? Right. Well, as time goes on, 1987 into 88, I lost our house. I would live with my step grandmother, four of us on one place, along with my stepfather, my step aunt, my step grandmother, all in one place. I got to go to Disney World for the first time before anything was big there. There was no Epcot. There was only Epcot, Disney World, Busch Gardens, and SeaWorld when I went to Florida that one time for that. There was nothing fun there by any means up until that point. I mean, I like Disney World. It was Disney World, right? What kid doesn't want to go to Disney World? But again, the town of Braintree threw that for me. The only birthday party I had during the whole time I was young is the one I had when I was 7. That's again because the town of Braintree threw it for me. They rented a McDonald's for me and had a party, and my kids from school came. But that was like the only time I had a birthday party the entire time I was younger. Now, when I was in 1987 into 88, I turned 8 years old in a mental hospital because again, I guess my step grandmother or my mother or whatever the case may be, whatever they told the doctor was enough to have them put me in a mental hospital now for 10 weeks. 10 weeks, folks. I want you to think about that. I'm 7, and for 10 weeks they kept me in a mental hospital for youth, for kids. Um, that was kind of my second exposure to being with other people who were mentally ill, I guess. But it was also my first time seeing a lot of that in for a long period of time. Um, I remember the feeling I'd have seeing the sadness on my mother's face, but also just not knowing really what was going on and, trying to keep her calm and keep her happy. Because I know it wasn't really her who wanted me there. It was the step family who wanted me in the hospital because I don't know what the problem was. Again, I wasn't like overly active. How they figure I had too much energy is beyond me. Did I write a lot? Yeah, I was starting to write short stories at that time. I think I was writing what they called fan fiction, I guess. I don't actually know if it's fan fiction. It was basically I was writing like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stories and various things like that, short stories, uh, and whatever else. I was writing songs, lyrics, and stuff like that. Again, I guess being creative is, I don't know, I guess a negative thing. Because outside of that, there really was nothing else to me. But I also, on top of that, I want you to remember, we're all staying in this house. We just lost our house in a fire. I already saw all the other stuff I already mentioned already. That my uncle almost killing my aunt and all these other things. And, it was not a fun time. We were already taken away by DSS and all split up. We had 4 kids, all of us split up. My brother went with me, and my other brother and my other sister went somewhere else. And it was this is all things I've already had to endure. And then I guess they felt I needed to go to mental hospital for 10 weeks. Um, so for those people who have never been to mental hospital, or from a kid's point of view, this is me as a kid point of view, you're around other kids. You're it. There's another kid in the room with you. You don't have your own room. You're a kid. So, but I had a roommate. I had a couple roommates. I guess I got along with my roommates that they put in the room with me. I didn't have too many issues with that. But in this hospital, I'd see people getting restrained. I saw kids getting restrained on a regular basis. Restrained. There was 2 things they did with the restraints. One, they either held them down and then would give them like a shot or a needle or whatever to relax them. Like all of these adults would pile on this little 60-pound kid who was flipping out or whatever. We call it flipping out, whatever they were having the meltdown because the kids didn't want to do what they wanted to do. So all these adults, 6, 7 adults, would jump on this little 60-pound kid and hold him down while one of the doctors and nurses would inject him with a needle, whatever, to calm him down, hold him for a little while longer, put him in the quiet room. Now, the quiet room is where they sent kids who did something that they deemed wrong or broke a rule. I was sent to the quiet room because I talked about my uncle, who at this time I almost watched him kill like I said, my uncle's nickname was Dick, short for Richard. And I didn't even know what his real name was. I always knew him as Uncle Dick. And I was talking about my Uncle Dick, and they put me in the quiet room. until he got there and they found out his name. We called him Dick. And then did I get an apology? No, I didn't get an apology for them misunderstanding what I was saying when I told them Uncle Dick was coming um, with my Aunt Peggy. So that's exactly what I said. And that's how they took it, is they didn't understand a name versus me being rude, I guess. So they put me in the quiet room once for like 5 minutes or whatever. But when kids were restrained, they either sat in the quiet room for a little while after they calmed down, or the other restraint I saw was kids getting strapped to the bed. So 6, 7 adults would strap the 60-pound kid to their bed, and because they were, I guess, out of control, I guess. And that's what I got to see at 7, 8 years old, almost every single night. That sounds healthy, right? That's not going to do any damage to anyone at all, seeing that over and over again. Uh, so I came back to school. By the way, I had to stay back in school because of the 10 weeks in the mental hospital. I actually had to repeat first grade because of missing school, which I didn't have a say in the matter. And I had to repeat first grade because I missed time from school from being in the mental hospital, which I didn't want to be in. So my friends who I was accustomed with, well, friends, I got accustomed with in first grade the first time around, went on to the second grade, while I stayed back with this new group of kids, and it wasn't even something I had control over. Now, the other part about school was back then I had a goal to make everyone in the school laugh because I wanted to be the school clown. And a lot of people had this perception that I was actually a wild and unruly kid. There was no reason behind what I was doing. There was. I wanted to make everyone in the school laugh. I always like to see people happy. I don't like seeing people sad or upset. So my goal is to make everyone in the school laugh. I did talent shows and made them laugh, or I made them sing, or I would sing a song, made them they enjoyed, or whatever else. And all honesty, back then, the things I would do back then today would probably get me expelled. As sad part is, that's how it is. But always being treated that way. Then my therapist or doctor at the time would come to visit me at the school after I got out of the hospital. And when he would come, I was embarrassed that, I was seeing a therapist every single week. That's why I couldn't go hang out with my friends after, so long or whatever. So, being that embarrassed as I was, I would, go and, when my therapist come to the school to check on me, so to speak, I would say, "Oh, that's my lawyer coming to visit me." Imagine you're in first grade telling other kids that your lawyer, or first or second grade, I should say, into third grade, that your lawyer is coming to visit your school, because that's more acceptable than saying that your therapist or psychiatrist is coming to visit you at school. Um, yeah, that's what happened there. And then, as far as the doctors and the therapists go, something you got to keep in mind: they're human. Sometimes, you go to, you go to medical school to get in the human service because you want to make a difference in the world to someone else. Sometimes you want to do it you want to expand your career. Sometimes you want to make a name for yourself, whatever the case may be. To me, I always look at two things. There's the people who know what it's like to have a real life problem, and there's the ones who learn about what it's like to have a real life problem. Being someone who's grew up in the system, so to speak, I know when someone is, so to speak, faking the funk, which means, so a person who learns what it's like to have mental illness, who learns what it's like to have trouble at home, will learn that from a book or some kind of a story, what they call what do we call it? They call it a character study or whatever. Yeah, a character study or a mental study or whatever. And there are books you can get that'll explain to you kind of how the mental illness works and how it's adapted. You can learn about this in college. I had to listen to that too, but because I've already lived through all of those, I didn't need that as much. So people who like me, who have been through the field, I can tell when someone knows what it's like to have an issue or know what it's like to come from that kind of environment versus someone who learned what it's like. And to me, I think there's a huge difference. And as far as helping someone, I personally always adapted better with people who I knew what it's like to be me, which I'll actually not a lot of people do. It is what it is. Um, so going forward, um, because again, I don't want to get too long. So that was my young upbringing. I was diagnosed again, like I said, ADHD, and then I was diagnosed with ADHD with a touch of schizophrenia or something, or psychosis, I guess, because the doctor who I was seeing on Tuesdays, because I didn't want to sit in the room all day and talk about feelings or whatever. I was a kid I was a boy, first of all, and I liked to do things, and I had imagination. So, I figured, oh, let's play cops and robbers. So, I told them how, oh, these people are trying to break in the room. Let's go catch these cops and robbers. This is a very common old game that kids played for many years before psychologists even existed. And this is never seen as a mental deficiency, and this was never seen as a psychotic thing. The kids pretend to be cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians because kids know when they're pretending. Apparently, this doctor didn't, because years later, I was actually with another doctor who was reading me my records at that time. And he was telling me how, in the notes, he put it that I was hallucinating about people breaking into the building and how they had to chase around invisible people that he could not see. That I was so certain I was. Again, this is someone who went to school to learn what it's like to have something, and this was what his opinion of me was that I was hallucinating about people was breaking into a building rather than the realistic thing that a kid wants to play cowboys and Indians or cops and robbers versus sitting in a room and talking about emotions. There are not many kids who want to sit around and talk about anything for long periods of time, for the record. That's been studied, proved too. Anywho, um, saving the, long-winded thing I did before, I was finally diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder when I was, 13. Um, I was like late 13. I was almost 14 when they finally diagnosed me correctly, I guess. See, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is sometimes referred to as war syndrome, shell shock, red fever, yellow fever. There's a lot of different things it's called. PTSD for short, for post-traumatic stress disorder. Mainly, what it is you experience such a traumatic experience in your life that it affects you profoundly for the rest of your life, and it affects your entire psyche. So you experience something so profound, so disturbing, or so something such a memorable moment in your life that you relive it over and over again. You're reminded of it over and over again. It affects everything: your sleep, your mood. We have things called flashbacks. People who have PTSD, sometimes, like, the reason why they call it, war syndrome or shell shock is because most people who have it, a lot of people who have it are people who are first responders, people who are in the military who might have been exposed to things that they had seen that are so traumatic and so graphic that affects them for the rest of their life. For example, soldiers, for example, who went to war and saw their friends getting hurt and shooting and all that stuff. Years later, they could be sitting in traffic and they hear a backfire in a car, and that'll set them into a flashback to bring them back to the Nam, and you would be amazed how scary that can be. Over the years, I've learned how to harness my feelings and how to, I know, different what they call red flags to know when I'm having an issue, when I'm not. But the reason why I was diagnosed with all of these other things prior is because a lot of them can be seen as symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. For example, bipolar is another thing that they tried saying I had. Bipolar is your mood goes up and down. You might be really energetic and really excited, then you might be really mellow and really sad. And that's kind of how that goes. Um, and unfortunately, when it comes to post-traumatic stress disorder, that's one of the symptoms is having emotions. You can go from 0 to 100. You can feel really, really excited, really happy, then really, really sad, really depressed. These are all part of that. It also affects your sleeping. I have insomnia, chronic severe insomnia to this day. That is something I still have to experience, but not so much the fact of, that, but also, listening to my mother and my stepfather arguing about things all night long until 4 in the morning sometimes. And then also, when I lived with my mother and her boyfriend, listening to them, drink and all these things until, calling the radio stations all night long, being doofuses and stuff. These are things that profound me in my head. That's why I have insomnia to this day, is because I never slept back then. I didn't know what I was going to sleep to. Um, Living with my stepbrothers and stuff like that, they had some severe issues too, but they were never treated. My brother, who I shared a room with, he would get angry sometimes. I don't know why, different reasons. People get angry. I was on the soccer team. I played a lot of sports in high school. I come home after a long day or hanging out with my friends, and you can ask my friends what happened when the brave ones who would come to my house. Not everyone would come to my house, which is why I had a hard time making friends until I was about 13. Um, but also at 13 was when my friend was shot and killed and bled to death in my arms. I didn't live in a serious city at that time. I lived in a little Mickey town, and we were at a house party, and a kid saw him, and he shot him, and he died in my arms. 13 years old. I was also 13 years old. Didn't know what I was going to do. Didn't know how to help him. Another friend of mine called 911. They put us on hold on Halloween night, 1993. That's how I remember. See, these are the situations which bring us to the post-traumatic stress disorder. These are the things that I relive over and over again. That's kind of what adds to that. So what you have to understand is, by the time I was 13, I had already had so many traumatic things happen to me before even being 13, that I was already there. I was already had PTSD at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. To be honest, some of that has to do maybe with the hospital, seeing some of those things, being exposed to that. Also, the other things I had to witness and observe. I'm not stupid, but also being called something and treated some way for the rest of your life is not a very positive feeling. To be constantly reminded that you have something like post-traumatic stress disorder, but then having people to refer to you as slow, or you're crazy, you're wild, you're this, that, the other thing, it doesn't make me slow. It doesn't make me any less of a person because I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't make excuses for anything I do, and I don't blame anything I do on post-traumatic stress disorder or mental illness. I know people can, and people have tried doing that, and that drives me crazy. That drives me upset, because I know that's disrespectful to people who, like me, who have mental illness, who don't use it for a crutch or make it a mistake, because right from wrong regardless. It doesn't mean you're mentally ill because you do something stupid. People make mistakes. Again, that doesn't make you mentally ill. That doesn't make whatever happens part of the thing. It's all about how you define yourself, not how everyone else does. And that's, I guess, what I'm going to leave you guys with. I went up to 1993, where I was finally diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. 1994, historically, as we know, that would start to be when I would start to break free from my step family. In 1995, I was living on my own. I was already living out. I was living in group homes and homeless shelters because I was emancipated at 13, 14, 15. Most people, when they're 15, 16 years old, are still living with their parents, eating the food, going to school, doing whatever they got to do. Me at 15, 16 years old, I was trying to get the rent together. I was living in the shelter with other adults. At 1994, started putting down actually 1993, we started putting the framework down. 1984, what is dubbed now as the F4L was really coming into place. Of course, it would be in 1996 the F4L will be officially named and be part of life, or part of my life. And actually, that's what actually saved part of me, is by embracing the F4L and living the F4L way with love, caring, compassion, understanding, and love, caring, compassion, understanding, respect for each other's individuality and their differences. That is what it means to be F4L, and that is something we created because that was something none of us who were in the F4L experienced in our own lifestyle, our own families. People treated us poorly. People didn't have those things, didn't treat us with those things. For a long period of time, I lived in group homes and hospitals. as I said, not hospitals, group homes, and then shelters, like I said, from 15, 16. I was emancipated at 16. I was making my own decisions. I was my own adult at 16. Um, and the whole entire time I'm under the label in the system. You're always in the system. And here's the thing. Um, if I was to go to a doctor today, see a psychiatrist or therapist today, he would read whatever my doctor wrote when I was 4 or 3, and that's kind of how he'd know me. That's how he's introduced to me versus talking to me first. Because here's the thing you have to understand. The minute you take anyone to get evaluated, they already have their label. That's their label. That's how you're seen in the system. You're not seen as a person. I'm not me. Whatever the illness they diagnosed me with is. For example, I have post-traumatic stress disorder. They don't see me as Sean Jazz Stevens. They see me as post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think that is really what makes it saddest. That's what some people don't understand. So I know a lot of people who, contemplate, should I bring my kid to see a psychiatrist and therapist? Should I put them on medication? I see a lot of people debating a lot of this. And to me, there are a couple things I look at. One, I remember my own upbringing. I remember how I felt going through all that, feeling like a constant outcast from everyone else, being treated like I was an outcast from everybody else. You would say, well, today it's not like it was back in 1980. People are more accepting. It is, but it's not. Um, Candidly, I was working as a news part. I was working as a news editor and for a long time worked as a social program coordinator for an adult day program for adults with mental illness for a long period of time. I volunteered for that for a long time. But when I wanted to take a paying position at that place, the current director basically was clear that she didn't understand how the clubhouse model worked, or didn't understand that you could coexist. In fact, she was very, very stigmatic in her thinking. She basically said that no one would take me seriously because I had a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. But by the way, this is a couple of years ago, not even last year. I was told that she wouldn't hire me for a paying position because I wouldn't be taken seriously. No one would respect me enough because I had post-traumatic stress disorder. But yet, I have 2 college degrees, one of them in human services. And also, I did the work that they do, but I did it for free. But when I wanted to get paid for it, that's when they decided I'm not good enough. That's what stigma is, ladies and gentlemen. That's race. That's also prejudice. And that was the director of the program who did that. Called the people overheard to complain because that's disrespectful and against the law. Because nowadays you have laws against people who unbiasedly don't hire people because of a mental illness or any kind of thing. That's called discrimination. Well, she basically said that that's the case. And then to boot, she brought another one of her colleagues in, one of her own staff people who were on the payroll, into a room with me. And then she tried pointing it that I was mistaken, that I didn't hear her what she said. And she did. The door was open, and the woman who was at the reception and who was another client heard what she said. And then when I called her bosses to complain, because I said, that's not how you run things, that's not what the model's about, they slipped it under the rug, and they did nothing about it. She's still the director of that program. I found other work other places. That's just fine. But the point I was trying to get at is stigma is still there. People still feel that. That's still a thing that affects people. I just wanted to point that out to you guys. It's not something in the past. It is something that's still today, which is still a thing. Um, so something to remember. But what I want you to know is when you take your kid to see these types of people, your doctors, their therapists, they're going to put a label on him or her. There's always going to be an evaluation, and every single evaluation, they will find something because here's the hidden truth. And this is something from someone who has a degree in human services. I can tell you this. If you sit on a park bench, because this is actually one of the things they teach you, it's an exercise. If you sit at a park bench and observe the people who walk by, you can diagnose them with any mental illness you want just by watching them. That's also sociology a little bit too. But you can do that. That's how that works. That's the science of labeling people, right? But here's the thing. This is the thing I want you to take away from this. You can put a label on milk in the refrigerator, right? It's still going to be milk. You could say, you know, Harry's milk. It's still going to be milk regardless what the label is they put on it. Same thing goes for anything else. If you put fruit salad in the fridge and you put a label on it that says your name on it, that's still fruit salad. That doesn't make it who you are. So whenever someone puts a label on you, whether it be a mental illness or any kind of a physical thing or whatever the thing is, whatever that label is, don't let that define who you are, because you're more than just a fruit salad. You're a person first. You're a human, first of all. And you're an individual. You are you. Don't let you, whatever the label is they put, define who you are. Yeah, it might be part of what a part of something that makes up who you are, but that doesn't define who you are, if you know what I mean. So, in other words, it's like this. I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I am not post-traumatic stress disorder. See the difference? I have post-traumatic stress disorder because I lived through a very traumatic and turbulent young life. Seeing how I was diagnosed at the age of 13, and even to this day, I still have a lot of those issues going on. I still have those memories. That stuff's not going to go away. I still have insomnia. It gets better in time, yes, but for so long, I let other people try to describe who I am, try to put labels on me or define who I am. I sat across from a person every single week who would judge me on our conversation. Like that gentleman when I was 8 years old. He couldn't tell the difference between someone who wanted to play cops and robbers versus someone who was psychotic. That's how that works. That's how the mental health works. I'm 8 years old. It's completely normal for me wanting to play cops and robbers and sit around in a room and talk about my feelings. It's abnormal for me to sit in a room and enjoy sitting in a room talking to another adult about my issues than it is for me to go on and go out and play like any other 8-year-old. That is a reality. And the other thing I want to let people know is when you have your kid in this system, so to speak, you're in the system for life until you figure it out. The person makes their own decision. And for so long, I took the medications they gave me. I went to the doctors like they did. I went to everything that I was supposed to. And then I realized, where is it getting me? What has it gotten me? They have a negative opinion on me. They judge me before I walk in the room. A lot of the new way of they do things, the new way of kind of doing the business, so to speak, is to tell the person you're meeting with that you're going to be meeting them for the first time. You want to get your own opinion of them before you read anything. That's a lie. Before you walk into the room, they've already read your record. They already know where you've been. They already know what you're doing. It's a scapegoat. They already looked at your record. They already agreed upon you. They already know what your diagnosis is. Again, they don't see you. They see whatever your illness is. That's what you got to understand. All right? And that's for the rest of your life. So if you go in there, you're 4, you're 5, when your kid goes in at 5 years old, 7 years old because he has too much energy. Like for me, for example, I had too much energy. But you know what? Give me something. I was also starting martial arts when I was when I was 4, 5, and I excelled in that. But guess what? As much as that as I could do, I could only go so far because everyone had to put the labels on me. Um, that's something else to probably consider. I was taking martial arts when they were telling me that I was unruly. I think anyone who's ever taken martial arts knows that it's a very strong discipline. It takes a lot of focus to be a good martial artist. And I was a grandmaster at 18. I was competing in tournaments at 5, and I was successful. And I actually didn't lose any. I had one tie. Yeah, one tie in my time. I know it's crazy, right? I had one tie and one draw. That was the same thing. One draw is what I had. And that's what I have on my record. I don't have a loss on any of my tournaments in my young time. And I did what they called freestyle tournaments, which now is known as MMA, because I was multi-trained. I was cross-trained in multiple arts: Chakudo karate, Muay Thai, Kenpo, Judo, Muay Thai, boxing, and amateur and professional wrestling. Well, professional wrestling didn't come later, neither did amateur wrestling. But at that time, a young age, before I was 10, I was already, highly trained in Kenpo karate, Chakudo karate, Judo, and Muay Thai. And I was a black belt in all, except for Muay Thai. Muay Thai, technically, there's no belt, but everything else, I was a black belt. I was already working my way up there. So that goes to show you. That's what drive, dedication, determination. So that's what I'm going to leave you guys with. So I'm sorry that if this wasn't kind of the whole thing I wanted to do, but I wanted to make sure this was done. I wanted to make sure it was addressed. In the end, you got to make your own decisions up. But I want you to really consider what it's like, from my point of view, being treated like an outcast by my own family and the kids at school and the people at school and the person across from the room from me didn't make my childhood very happy. I'm not saying every kid's like that. I'm not saying that's not going to help, but I'm just saying maybe look into another way. Maybe the art of actually talking to your kids. Because I could tell you this: the entire time I was a kid, not once did my mother, my stepfather, or anybody else sit down and talk to me. My aunt would, but no one ever talked to me. My mother never said, "Hey, how do you feel about this?" My stepfather said, "Hey, what do you want to do?" Talking to your kids, communication is the best way for anything, and understanding and respect is the best way to do anything. And respect is earned, not given. So there you go. That's what I'm going to leave you with. So again, I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I am not post-traumatic stress disorder. Don't let your label define you. To this day, I am happily married. I got 2 kids. I am in my car that I'm driving because I got my license. My son has his permit that he was able to get without even having to read the book, because I was constantly teaching him how to drive or telling him little things about the road so that he was able to get his permit because he knows that stuff. That being said, I guess I'm not as bad as they made it out to be now, huh? I got my license. I have 2 college degrees. I became a professional wrestler. I have a wife, 2 great kids. Um, everything's a work in progress. I'm driving. I have my own car. I have everything I have in my life. I earned myself. I got on my own from no one, from anybody. Everyone else, my brothers, my sisters, and all that stuff, they got the pass by everybody else. But in the end, I probably had the more successful and the happier life, as sad as tragic as it sounds. I had training that they didn't have. I was exposed to things they weren't, so I'm able to stand on my own 2 feet, unlike them. I can live on nothing. I don't think any of my brothers or my sister could ever live in a shelter. They can't do that. I did that for a long period of time. I got my Section 8 voucher when I was 18 years old, because at that point I'd already been in the shelter 3 times. And I graduated high school with honors, became a professional wrestler, got 2 college degrees, as I said, wrote many successful writing short stories, again, world championships in wrestling, and trained in the future wrestling. There you go. So don't let your things define you, folks. Make your own life, okay? May all your dreams come true, everyone. I am Sean Jazz Stevens. Peace, everyone. May all your dreams come true.